Hello and welcome. My name is Anthony, and this is Fluorescent Learning. In this video, we'll discuss if statements, for loops, while loops, and then wrap it all up with a fun little calculator project. So what is an if statement? Well, an if statement is just a line of code that checks if the condition we give it is true, and if it is, we execute the code within that if statement, but if it isn't, then we skip over the entire if statement block. Let's see an example in VS Code. Let's go ahead and make a new file. We'll call it control flow. Control glow. Control flow. Oh, I did it again. .py. Okay, now let's make a list as a variable. We'll call it shopping cart. We're at the grocery store. And in our shopping cart, we'll have milk, eggs, and bread, balling on the budget. Now let's check if we have something in our shopping cart. So in Python, we can say if, and then we'll have the item we're looking for. Let's say cheese, I don't know, in, and then we'll give our list. If cheese is in our shopping cart, we'll print you have cheese, and then after that we'll print everything checked. Now let's run our program, and there you go. You see, it did not print you have cheese because we didn't have cheese in our shopping cart. Let's go ahead and add cheese, clear this, run it again, and look, we have cheese. Nice. If you noticed before, let me go ahead and remove cheese, and we'll run it one more time. You see, even though we didn't have cheese, it still printed everything checked. Now this is because, like I said earlier, it checks if the if statement is true, and if so, it runs everything in the if statement, that whole block. And if it isn't, it'll skip right over it onto the next line. And Python is real particular about indentation. So here, everything on this line is run. Then it checks this if statement. If it's true, it goes into the if statement. This indentation lets us know that it's inside the if statement. But if it's false, it continues on this line straight down here onto the next block of code. We can chain what's called an elif statement, which is short for else if, onto our original if statement. And what that does is basically say, if first statement true, else if this other statement is true. So if the first one doesn't pass, it checks the second one. Let's see how we do it in VS Code. So here we have cheese, right? We know we don't have cheese, so it would only print this line. Let's add an else if, or elif in Python. We'll say bread in shopping cart, print you have bread. Let's run our code. There we go. We have bread. You see, it first checked if we have cheese. We didn't. So it went on to the next one, our elif statement, checked that it was true, printed we have bread, and then came out and printed this one. Now let's see what happens if the first if statement is true. So we'll add cheese back. Let's run it. And look at that. Only cheese was printed, even though we also have bread. And that's because with the if elif chain, if the first if statement is true, then all of the other following elif statements would get skipped because we're only checking for the first one. If the first if statement is false, that's when it starts going on to the next ones. And you can chain as many elif statements as you want. Let's try adding another elif statement. We'll check for milk this time. Now let's get rid of the ones we know we have, so we can see how it runs our third if statement. All right, let's run it. And there we go. We have milk. So check this first one, false, went to the next one, false again, and went to the third one, which was true. So as we see, it checks these conditions one by one. If this one's true, do this. If this one, do this. If this one's true, do this. But if you wanted to have sort of a in any other case situation, then do this, we use an else statement. So let's come down here and say else print look for something else. Now let's remove, or we can just, yeah, let's remove this one. So we only have eggs. We know we don't have cheese, bread, or milk. Let's see what happens. Let's run it. And look at that, look for something else. So all of these conditions were false. Then we paired or attached an else statement at the end, which is sort of an in any other outcome, do this line of code situation. We saw earlier that with the if, elif chain or combo, it'll check the first if statement, and if that's true, then none of the preceding, following elif statements would get run. If we want to check for more than one situation, then we can chain if statements. Let's take a look. So we'll add bread back to our list. Let's add them all back. We'll add bread and milk. Now instead of elif right here, I'll change if. So if we have cheese, if we have bread, and then we start our elif else combo. Let's run it. Oops, I forgot to get the cheese. Just like in real life, I always forget the groceries. Okay, let's try it again. And there you go. You check the first if statement, true, you have cheese. Second if statement, true, you have bread. Now after this second if statement, that's when it starts the if, elif, else chain, where only this first one gets run, and if it's true, then none of the other preceding statements get checked. If it's false, then it starts going to the elif, then the else statements. Right now we're checking if an item is in a list, but we can also do comparison checks. Let's take an example of what I mean. So let's delete all of this. Okay, now let's say if 5 is greater than 4, which it is, print that checks out. Let's run it. That checks out. Now this is the greater than sign, and it's what's known as a comparison operator. There's greater than, less than or equal to, greater than, equal to, and they all check basically as the name implies, whether something is greater than or equal to. And just like with the other case when we were checking if milk was in the list, this checks if blank is greater than, less than, whatever, to the other thing you're comparing it to. Let's do another example. Let's say if 10 equals 10. And notice the double equal sign. Single equal sign is assigning to a variable. Double equal sign is comparing if they're equal to each other. Print, yes, 10 equals 10. Let's check it out. And there we go. That checks out. And yes, 10 equals 10. Besides comparison operators, we also have logical operators, or logic operators, I think they're called. And basically they're called and, or, not. Let's see an example of each. So for here, 5 is greater than 4. I'll say and 4 is less than 5. So if 5 is greater than 4 and 4 is less than 5, this should print, which it should, and there it is. That checks out. So for this using and, both statements have to be true. So if I change this and 4 equals 5, which it doesn't, I don't think, it doesn't get run because both conditions have to be true when using the and. But for here, if I say or, it's basically one or the other has to be true. Here he goes, that checks out. Because 5 is less than 4. Even though this is false, only one of them has to be true. Now not can be a little confusing, but basically it's checking that it's false. So here if I say 10, and for the comparison operators, not equal to is this. It's an exclamation and then an equal sign saying 10 does not equal 10. If we run it, only the first line gets run because this is false. 10 does equal 10. But if I say if not 10 does not equal 10, yeah, that sounds a little confusing, but there you go. Yes, 10 equals 10. Let's see if I can try and explain this a little better. So on the left we have our if-else statement, and on the right a table with different scenarios we'll test. So for the first one we have if 10 equals 10. So we go to our if statement and we check everything inside our if statement if it's true. We have 10 equals 10. We know that is true. Therefore, true gets printed. For the next one, we have if 10 does not equal 10. Again, we check everything in our if statement. 10 does not equal 10. We know this is false. So that means our else statement gets ran and false gets printed. For the next one, we have if not 10 equals 10. We check everything in the if statement and we have not 10 equals 10. Let's go ahead and split this up. So on the right, we just have 10 equals 10. We'll check this. We know it's true, but we also have not in front of it. So essentially inside our if statement, we have not true. Now if something is not true, then it must be false. So our if statement is false, which means it doesn't run. Therefore our else statement would run and false gets printed. For the last one, we have if not 10 does not equal 10. This is the one that sounds a little confusing. But again, we do the same steps. Check everything in the if statement. We have not 10 equals 10. We'll check the right side. 10 does not equal 10. We know this is false because 10 equals 10. And we have not in front of it. So essentially in our if statement, we have not false. Now if something is not false, then it must be true. And since our if statement is true, true gets printed. So an easier way to explain it, I guess, would be that not basically returns the opposite. Not false returns true, and not true returns false. So far we've only used the comparison operators to check if one number is greater than another or equal to it. But in Python, you can use the equals to operator to check if a string is equal to another. Let's try an example. Okay, I just wrote a program to compare strings. Let's test it out. So here's the scenario. Scene. You did something pretty bad that got you in trouble. Your mom has had enough of arguing with you and tells you, you're grounded, go to your room. How do you respond? Now, some of you may have been braver than I and maybe responded with a question like, and if I don't? Let's see what the outcome could have been. You have died. Okay. Let's say we can go back in time and change our answer. Same scenario. Let's respond with maybe another question. Or what? You have died. Okay. Maybe those are too bold of an answers. A common answer maybe have been whatever. You say whatever. Your grounding sentence has been extended. And it's not as bad as death. Let's try one last one. Let's say we're smart and we don't say anything. You have survived. That's always the goal. Let's see how this program works. So up here, printing the scene, the entire scenario, just regular print statements. And then we get an input from the user, and we assign that to the variable response. And then here is our if-elif chain of statements. So first we check if the response is equal to this string, or if your response is equal to this string. And if so, run this and then exit the program. If this isn't true, it checks this one. If this one isn't, it checks this one. And I couldn't think of any more scenarios, so if you answered anything else, this line would have run. Aside from using conditionals such as the if-else statements to control the flow of our code, we also have loops. The first type of loop we'll cover is a for loop. A for loop just basically says, for this many times, do this. That's it. Let's take a look in VS Code. So we write our for loop by using the word for, and we'll say for I in, and in Python there's a built-in function called range, which just gives you a range of numbers, like a list of numbers. Range 3. Within our for loop, we'll say print hello. Run it, and there you go. It prints hello 1, 2, 3 times. Let's see what I is. So in our print function, let's just print I. And look at that, 0, 1, 2. So the range function returns a range of numbers. Since we inputted 3, we're saying stop just before the number 3. When you only input one number into the range function, the default starting value is 0. That's why it's giving me 0, 1, 2. Now within the range function, we can specify where we would like to start. So if I come here and I say give me range starting at 1 and stop just before 3. Let's run it. We only get 1, 2. Now that's because since I've given it this first parameter, this second one now is the stop point. And remember, it stops just before the number we give it. So if I give it 4, and we'll run it, I now get 1, 2, 3, saying start at 1 and stop before the number 4. We can also give it a multiplier, I guess, a value to skip by. So we'll start from 2, we'll go to 10, and we'll skip by 2's. So let's print I. There you go, 2, 4, 6, 8. Started at 2, skipped 2 each time, and it stopped just before 10. Let's say we have a list of items and we wanted to go through each item in the list one by one. Let's see how to do that in Python. So we'll create a list. Let's just say numbers, and I'll give it a list of random numbers. Now let's iterate, that's the fancy word of what we're doing, iterate through the list one by one and get the value of each number in the list. So we'll say for I, we'll change this now, and we want it to be number. So for number in, we'll change this to numbers, print number. So for number in numbers, print the number. That sounds confusing, but let's see. And there you go. Each of the numbers we have in the list is then printed. The for loop is sort of special in this way. It iterates through the list that we just gave it. And it takes on, each iteration, it'll take on the element in that list as the value. So here, number, each time it goes through the list one by one, it takes on the value of the item in that list. So for here, the first go, number is 1, prints number. And then the next one, number is 4, and it prints the 4. And it does that so on and so forth until the end of the list. There's another way of doing this by indexing through the list. Let's see how it's done. So we'll leave this, or we'll change this to I. And in Python, there's another built-in function that returns the length of an array or list. So I'll say for I in len, for length, numbers, print numbers I, which would be the index value. Let's run it, and we get an error. And that's because the len numbers just returns a single number. It doesn't return a list. So if I clear this and I put all of this inside of range, which will return us a range of numbers. Now let's run it, and there you go, the same, 1, 4, 5, 6, 0. And remember, this is because when we give just a single number in the range function, it starts at 0 and it gives you a list of numbers up to the number you gave it. So here it would start at 0, so I would be 0, and it's basically saying numbers 0 index, which is 1. The next iteration, I is 1, numbers the first index, then it goes to 4, and so on and so forth throughout the whole list. So quick visual explanation of what I just said, just in case you're more of a visual learner. Here we have our numbers list and our for loop. For I in range len numbers, print numbers I. So in our for loop, we have range len numbers. So within range, we have len numbers. Now, what is len numbers? It's just asking the length of the numbers. So we count the items we have in our list, and there is 5. So the length of our numbers list is 5, which means our range function basically says range 5. Now if we remember earlier, when we give just one argument into the range function, the default start value is 0. So range 5 basically returns a list from 0 to 4. Now we go back to our for loop, and we have I for I in range. So I, as I said, starts or takes the value of each element in our list. Our list right now is a range from 0 to 4, so I is 0. Then we come to our print statement and we have numbers I. Since I is 0, we're basically saying numbers 0 index. Within our numbers list, the 0 index is 1, so we print 1. Now we come back to our for loop. I takes on the next iteration or the next item in the list, so now it's 1. We come back to our print numbers statement. I is 1. We're basically saying numbers 1 index. 1 index value, we have the number 4, so 4 gets printed. And it just does this repetitively until the end of our range list. We can also use a for loop to go through a dictionary, getting all the values one by one. Let's see how it's done. Okay, so I've made a dictionary called phone book. And for the keys, we have names, and the values of each key, we just have a random number. Now let's use a for loop to iterate through the dictionary and get each number. So I'll change this just for fun. Well, not for fun, it's to make sense. We'll say for name in, and then we'll give our dictionary, phone book, print. Now remember, to access the value, you need to give the key. So we'll say for name in phone book, print phone name. Basically give me the value within the phone book dictionary given this key. Let's go ahead and print it. And there you go. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 100. Follows perfectly with this order we have here. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 100. Remember, with the for loop, this is because the name is taking on the value of each key within the dictionary. So for the first iteration, name is Anthony. Then I say, give me the value within the phone book dictionary for the key Anthony. And in the next iteration, it becomes Billy, and so on and so forth. The other loop we have in Python is a while loop. A while loop basically just says, while this condition is true, keep doing this. And then when it becomes false, it breaks the while loop. Let's see an example in VS Code. So let's delete all this. We'll create a variable called counter, and we'll set it equal to 0. Now let's say while counter is less than 3, and then we'll give our code on what we want it to do. We'll just print hello, and then at the end we'll say counter equals counter plus 1. Let's go ahead and run it. And there you go. Hello is printed 3 times. Now let's go through it. So counter first starts off at 0, and we say while counter is less than 3. This statement is true because counter is 0 for now, so we print hello once. Then we run this line. Counter is counter plus 1, so now counter has a value of 1. And we go to the top. 1 is still less than 3. We go through it again. We run this line. Counter is now 2. We come to the top. 2 is still less than 3. We print hello. And then we run it again. Counter is now 3. This becomes false, and we break the loop. You have to be careful when using while loops, because if you don't write it, I guess, good, the while loop can go on infinitely. Let's see an example. Hopefully I don't blow up my laptop. So we'll delete this line of code right here. Right, so now while counter is less than 3, this is true, so it should print hello. Now counter is 0, and we're not doing anything with it, so this will always be true. Let's see what happens. And there you go. You can sort of see it tweaking out right here, twitching. but this is just constantly running. Let me go ahead and stop it before my computer blows. Within the for loop and while loop, we can add cases, I guess is the word. I don't know the proper vocabulary for it, but basically we can add break, continue, and pass for certain conditions. Break says if so and so happens, break out of the loop no matter what, even if there's code below it. Continue says if this happens, then just skip to the next iteration. Don't worry about the code below it. Pass basically does nothing. It just says pass, keep going. I'll show you an example of each. So here are print hello. Let's add a break to it. So we know this as it is now would run infinitely. But let's say if counter is equal to 0, break. Let's run it. And look at that. It only ran once. My computer is saved. So here, counter is 0 as soon as we start. So this statement is true. This line of code gets run. Then it checks this conditional. And counter is equal to 0. Then we run this and break from the loop. Let me show you. So even if I print hello again after the if counter equals 0 statement, and we run it, only hello gets printed. Because as soon as this becomes true, we say break from the loop. Let's try adding the continue I spoke about earlier. So right here we'll say if counter is 0, instead of breaking, let's just print it counter equals 0. And then underneath we'll say continue. Now I still don't want it to run infinitely, so we'll have to break it. So I'll say else if counter equals 1, then we will break. Let's go ahead and run it. Now you see I goofed here because we're not doing anything to counter. So underneath, let's add counter plus equals 1. Oh, that needs to be together. Okay, now let's try it again. I see what my problem is. Let me explain it. So here, counter is 0. We say if this is true, we print it. But now I added this continue. And that's saying, like I said earlier, ignore all this and go back to the top. So this code here never gets ran. Let's go ahead and move it inside. Now we should be fine. And there you go. We print hello. Counter 0, we come into here, we add 1 to counter, and instead of continuously going through it, we break. After we add 1, it comes to this iteration again. Counter is false. We check this one, counter is 1, and we break from the code. And for pass, it's basically used when you want to write the conditional, but you're not sure what to do after. You can write the conditional and just put in pass as sort of a placeholder until you figure out later what you want to do. So when that conditional becomes true, it'll just say pass, and Python will just go on to the next line, continue, without doing anything. Let me show you an example to maybe explain it better. So let's go back to a for loop. We'll say our list, and we'll just do numbers again, and we'll say for number in list, if number is 3, pass, which basically means do nothing. And then we'll print the number. And there you go. See? For the first iteration, number is 3, and we say if number equals 3, run this. But we just have pass, and that's to, I guess, sort of give us help later on that we write the code first, and then later on we can think about what we want to actually put in that if statement. Sort of like a placeholder for now. Like, I'll worry about it later. Now those 3, break, continue, pass, work for both the for loop and the while loop. For the first exercise for this video, we'll create a program that will check if a number is prime. And if you're not sure what it means for a number to be prime, I'm not a math teacher, but I think Best way to explain it is the only multiples the number has is 1 and itself. So for example, 3 would be a prime number. It's 1 and 3. You multiply 1 times 3. Those are the only integers you can multiply to get 3. But let's run a program to do it faster. So we'll create a file, call it exercise prime, and let's begin. So we'll first get a number from the user and we'll convert it into an integer. Input, give a number to check if it is prime, and we'll use a for loop. So we'll say for I in range of numbers starting at 2. And I don't include 1 because we know almost all numbers basically have 1 as a multiple. We'll say from 2 up to number, if number modulo I is equal to 0, print the following. We'll say number is not prime, or is not a prime number, and then we'll show why. We'll say I times the integer value of number divided by I equals number. And you see how this string is, or this line of code is sort of getting past this line. I can easily just within the print close my first string, press enter, and then begin my new string on the next line. I'll go ahead and let that be known it's an F. So now this is one complete string, and we'll see when it gets printed. And then we will break. So we'll keep iterating over through all the numbers, integers, starting from 2 all the way up to the number they give us, and we'll check if it's a multiple of that number, and if it is, then we'll immediately break. Else, we'll print with an F string that their number is a prime number. Let's go ahead and give it a go. So give a number to check if it is prime. So we know 3. We'll go ahead and click 3. 3 is a prime number. Let's try it again. Prime number, I want to say 11. Only 1 times 11 will give you 11. 11 is a prime number. Dang, I don't know that many prime numbers. Maybe 37? Okay, that seems right. Let's explain it. So first we get the number from the user, and we convert it to an integer. Now here we say for I in range starting from 2 all the way up to the number, do everything within the for loop. And remember, with the for loop, I takes on the value of this range. So first I starts at 2, then it becomes 3, 4, so on, all the way up to their number. Now for this if statement, I say if number modulo I equals 0. And what that basically means, it checks if the number they gave us is divisible by the number in the iteration that we were on. So for here, if they gave us 6, I say if number modulo, and we're on 3, 3 equals 0. This would be true. 6 divided by 3 gives me remainder 0. Then that means that the number is not a prime number. And it'll keep continuously doing that, checking each number in that range. Else, when this ends, we print it's not a prime number. Let's try a number that we know isn't prime, like 4. 2 times 2 is 4. And there you go. 4 is not a prime number. 2 times 2 equals 4. And this line is this broken up string that I wrote earlier. Using an F string, we print their number, plugging it in, is not a prime number. And we show that the iteration that we're on, or the number, times, and then give the other multiple, dividing the number by I, equals their number. I hope that didn't confuse you. Math can be confusing, but the program works. For the project for this video, we'll create a calculator that will allow the user to add, subtract, multiply, divide 2 numbers for as long as they want until they're ready to quit the program. Let's try it out. So I'll create a file and we'll call it calculator.py, and we'll begin. Now since we want the program to run theoretically forever, I'll place it all under a while true loop. And remember, the while loop runs as long as the condition is true. And if I have true as my condition, it'll theoretically run infinitely. So I'll say number 1 is equal to an input from the user, and we'll say first number. Now this is a string, and I purposely left it as a string because we want the user to be able to quit the program. So right after they give their input, I'll say if number 1 equals Q, then we'll break. And here, let me give it a message to the user, just saying Q to quit. All right, now let's go ahead and copy paste this, and we'll change it to number 2, and we'll leave the same. If number 2 equals Q, also break. And if they don't break from either of them, we'll say number 1 equals, and then we'll go ahead and turn it into an actual number float. And we'll do the same for number 2. We'll turn it into a float. Now we need the operation, so I'll go ahead and put that in here in the middle. And we'll say operation is an input from the user. What is the operation? And I'll also give the Q to quit option. And then again, we'll check if they type Q. And if they do, we'll quit. Alright, so we get the number. Check if they type Q, we break. Operation, if they type Q, we break. And then the same with number 2. Now let's do the calculating part. We'll say if operation is equal to the plus sign, print with an F string, number 1 plus number 2 equals, and then we'll put number 1 plus number 2. And we'll go ahead and copy this just to make it quicker. Alright, now we'll change this, and we'll say minus number 1 minus number 2. If they do times, change it to multiplication, and then division. And we'll change these to elif, so it only does one or the other. So it'll check if this is true. If not, it runs this. If not, it just goes on to the next one, next one, next one. And let's give an option in case they give an operation that does not exist or we're not familiar with. We'll just say incorrect operation. Alright, let's go ahead and test it out. First number. Let's go ahead and test our quit first. I'll say Q. Program ends. Perfect. Let's try again. First number, we'll say 5. What is the operation? Again, we'll test our Q, and it ends. Perfect. First number 5. What is the operation? We'll say plus. Oh, that's my bad. This should be second number. We're right here for number 2. I should have wrote second number. Now we're good. Now it'll make sense. We'll say 5 plus, and then we'll check our Q, and it does quit. Alright, now let's do some calculating with our calculator. 5 plus 10. And there you go. 5 plus 10 is 15. And it asks us again. We'll say 87. What is the operation? Times, I need one I can do in my head. 800 or 100, so it should be 8700. And look at that, 8700. And let's go ahead and quit. And there you go. Calculator calculated correctly. Well, that's it for today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you learned something. In the next video, we'll discuss functions, which are just reusable blocks of code, and modules, which are functions in different Python files that we can use in our Python file. It'll make sense, I promise. I'll see you in the next lesson.